Jack Farrell gets underneath Darrow, and it's his second appearance at Politics and Prose. The first was for his marvelous biography of Tip O'Neill. And he got underneath Tip, too. And O'Neill is sorely missed today, as is Clarence Darrow. Jack, you're an exemplar author for what P&P is about, for what Politics and Prose is about, so we're really happy to have you here. I wanted to do this introduction very much because I was a great admirer of O'Neill and of your book on O'Neill. And I can tell you from having read Jack Farrell's book on Clarence Darrow, it's another book worth reading that helps us understand part of our legacy in America and a very turbulent and special time. You know, we think of Darrow often defined by the movies. There's Spencer Tracy and Inherit the Wind, and we all know about the Scopes trial. And there's Orson Welles as Darrow in Compulsion. We all know about Leopold and Loeb. But what you've done is, in your both that combination of your journalism and the kind of current work you're doing at the Center for Public Integrity, it helps you serve as a perceptive and artful biographer. Darrow's principles and passions at times caused him to compromise and violate principles that he believed in. And you captured that with some empathy and psychological understanding of human failings. And when you go through the book and you read it, you run across characters we admire or find that we'd like to have dinner with or be in a carpool with, like Justice Brandeis, Emma Goldman, who was a critic, Arthur Garfield Hayes, Roger Baldwin. This dates me because these were heroes in my time because they were founders of the ACLU, and many others. One is Lincoln Steffens, and if you read the book carefully, you find that Jack was really influenced in part by Lincoln Steffens' wonderful autobiography. And so I came away today because this is not only Bastille Day, this is also the day that Sacco and Vanzetti were executed. So my what if is, what would have happened if Darrow had been their lawyer and had not been rejected by the Sacco and Vanzetti defense team, which thought he was too much of a Chicago Midwesterner for this New England elite crowd. The result might have been different. But at any rate, let us welcome Jack Farrell.
It's really nice to be introduced by David, who actually gave me great insight for the Tip O'Neill book. He was a wonderful help. I came a little bit early tonight so I could meet Lissa and Brad and make sure that the bookstore is passing into great hands. And I was assured by meeting them and talking to them that it is. You really are a wonderful community of people, and I think the great thing about Politics and Prose is that we can continue to belong here, we can continue to show up, we can continue to pay a little bit extra for our books than we would on Amazon. But you know what? You can't meet me on Amazon. You can't meet David on Amazon. You can't come out on a night like tonight on Amazon. And we need great bookstores, great independent bookstores, and I'm very proud, as I said, with Tip O'Neill, which was 10 years ago, to be reading at Politics and Prose. 100 years ago this fall, Clarence Darrow stood on a downtown Los Angeles sidewalk and watched the police seize his chief investigator, caught in the act of bribing a juror. A few weeks later, Darrow himself was indicted on 2 counts of bribery. Burt Franklin, the investigator, agreed to testify in return for favored treatment and immunity from the state. He swore that Darrow had ordered him to pay $4,000 to jurors who agreed to vote not guilty. Darrow was at the height of his fame, one of America's foremost trial lawyers, political leaders, and populist champions, when his career careened off track in Southern California. Staggered by his shame, he left his wife one rainy night for the apartment of his mistress. He had a revolver in one pocket and a whiskey bottle in the other. He sat down at a table, a brown circular table underneath a hanging, unshaded light bulb, and he vowed to kill himself. They're going to indict me, he said. I can't stand the shame. And fortunately for us, she talked him out of it. Darrow went on, and he created an American archetype, the advocate for the common folk, hooking his thumbs in his vest or his suspenders, regarding the jury from beneath that cascading shock of hair, speaking with plain but emotional conviction of the nobility of man, the frailty of mankind, and the threat to liberty posed by narrow-minded men of wealth and their legal guns for hire. And his words continue to resonate today. This is one of my favorite Darrow quotes. Tell me if it doesn't remind you of a certain era that we're living in now. With the land and possessions of America rapidly passing into the hands of a favored few, with thousands of men and women in idleness and want, with wages constantly tending to a lower level, with the knowledge that the servants of the people elected to correct abuses are bought and sold in legislative halls at the bidding of corporations and individuals, with all these notorious evils sapping the foundations of popular government and destroying personal liberty, a rude awakening must come. And if it shall come, he would warn, when you look abroad over the ruin and desolation, remember the long years in which the storm was rising, and don't blame the thunderbolt. It was quite a show. In the days before radio and motion pictures, the era's legal clashes played the role of mass entertainment. It was not unusual for his courtrooms to be packed with lawyers, off-duty judges, newspapermen, politicians, the local bishop, and the hallways outside jammed with spectators trying to get in, all to see Darrow close for the defense. At times, a mob of thousands would spill through the corridors, down the stairs, out into the yard, to surround a courthouse. They'd raise ladders so that they could listen at the windows. In lectures and public speaking, Darrow affected a humble awkwardness. In court, simplicity, to endear him to his audience. He might start with his arms folded, tapping his gold spectacles on his shoulder, his brow contracted in thought. Often he would lean on the rail, as if to take the jurors into confidence, and he would speak very, very lowly, until the jurors in the back row would have to lean forward because they didn't want to miss what he was saying. And then all of a sudden he would shout, he would point at the prosecutor, he would accuse him of all sorts of evil wrongdoing. His voice would turn harsh, his muscles would tighten, he would soar to a crescendo, swing his arms. And then the storm would pass, the sun would return, the jurors would relax, and Darrow would be genial, engaging, lightening the mood with a wisecrack. He was a very, very witty man. He never addressed juries, he said. He talked to them. His appeals to juries were all about context, for the judges and the prosecutors of Victorian America knew what they were there for. They were there to exact vengeance and to safeguard property and propriety. But Darrow believed that jurors, and this was revolutionary, if given the opportunity and a skillful enough invitation, could be persuaded to look past the legal particulars, to judge a defendant in the context of the times, the situational factors that prompt behavior, background. He sought to make even the most hideous of crimes, and he represented some hideous defendants, comprehensible. He'd stand, slouch his shoulders, talk quietly, and hardly mention the facts of the case at all. With a great wealth of illustrations, he'd talk about human beings, the difficulties of life, the futility of human plans, the misfortunes of the defendant, the strange workings of fate and chance that had landed him in this courtroom in this trouble. He'd try to make the jury understand not so much the case as the defendant. And it was not unusual in the late 19th and early 20th century for lawyers to take many hours, spread over 2 or 3 days, to give a closing argument in a significant case. In the Leopold and Loeb case in Chicago in 1925, Darrow spoke for 3 days, without notes, in marvelous displays of intellect and concentration and focus. It was more than just a tactic. It was his creed. He was a determinist. He didn't believe in free will, nor good and evil, nor choice. There were no moral absolutes, no truth, no justice.